Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide. I figured we would keep the theme this week as fairy tale just because with Blazing Dominion coming out, I assume everyone else is going to be covering like Killer Tune and RDA and Predaplants and stuff. And the new fairy tale stuff is probably going to be overlooked to some extent, so if you're looking for resources for it, I got you, my guys. So this one's a full-on Spellslop deck, using just a million different engines that are all spellcaster based and all kind of work with each other and flow into and out of each other in ways that are really complicated but make for a very like satisfying branching deck that has a lot of extension and a lot of starters. The biggest weakness here is that while we do have a lot of one-ofs we don't mind seeing, we don't mind opening Astalar or Sylvie or Rushia, we do still have a lot of one-ofs we don't want to see. So like any of the Allure Queens, they're okay as discards for various things, but you don't love to see them. And the Charmers can be garnets on certain hands, but that's why we do have a lot of ways to discard them, because as soon as you put them in the grave, they're not garneted anymore. You can still use the Spellbook of the Grand Circle. You just have to have a way to get them out of your hand to do it. But we do have a lot of ways to do that, like the Allure Queen stuff, like Droplet. We can manage. And so, rather than do a card by card, because I don't want to be here all day, we're just going to talk individually about what each engine kind of does and brings to the deck. We'll start with White Forest because they're at the top. These first three engines are really good at just like bridging you into basically anything else in the deck. White Forest is no exception there because we're a synchro deck that is going through Risiella, Sinister Soul of the White Forest during basically any combo. And this card allows you to send a spell trap from hand or field to grave to add a White Forest card or a light spellcaster from deck to your hand. Notably, all of the fairy tales are light spellcasters. Spenta is a light spellcaster. Let's see which one, Chaos Allure Queen is a light spellcaster. Any of those guys can get you into a different engine altogether. So that means that by doing the normal White Forest thing where we're pitching something to summon out Sylvie, to search something, to make Risiella, to make Diabel, to get something back, to maybe make a Chaos Angel on the opponent's turn, or turn things into Vengeance Dragon. Yeah, during all of that, we can bridge into another engine out of White Forest along the way. Next up is the Allure Queens, which is like an underexplored archetype in my opinion, just because people dismiss it because it's Allure Queens. And you do have to play these three cards, and you don't really want to see 3 or 7 in your opening hand. Again, you can pitch them off of certain things, but it's not like they aren't doing anything on their own. Chaos is a lot better. She can discard to summon herself and then kind of go from there. So she can do stuff on her own. But where the engine really shines is the 6 copies of Allure Palace we have here. Dance searches Palace with upside. We really like to see Dance. But even if you just see Palace, it does combo you through a whole bunch of stuff. And that is because Palace it's an insane card that people just don't use. All of your spellcasters gain 500 attack and defense, cool, whatever, we don't really care. But you can send a card from hand to grave to add to hand or special summon to your opponent's field in Allure Queen. We're, in this deck, never summoning to the opponent's field, we don't really have a reason to. But you can add the Chaos, and then because that's not once per turn, it is thrice per turn, you can add one of the other ones as well, depending on the situation, which gives you discard fodder for the Chaos to summon her back, to equip the one that you discarded. And that's important because Allure Palace has another effect that it gives to your Allure Queens. Any Allure Queen you have that has an equipped monster can send itself to the grave to summon out a spellcaster with 1500 or less attack from deck. So basically the idea is activate Palace, discard 2 to go get Chaos, and again, one of the other ones depending on the situation. Chaos, discard the other one, summon itself out, summon the one equip the one you discarded. Then you can send her off, equipped with the other one, to get anything, basically. I mean, it doesn't get the fairy tales specifically, but that's okay. We can bridge into those through other engines. That summons Astalar from deck, which is insane. That summons, let's see, it summons out the Zorua if you want to do that, but normally if we're going into the Magistus engine off of that, we'll go into Riliona, not the Zorua directly. We'll talk about that in a second. But it just bridges you into basically anything else in the deck, and because anything in the deck bridges to anything else, we just go from there while accruing resources and follow up and just like building this giant unoutable board along the way. And then even better, Allure Dance just searches the Allure Palace, but it's also Soul Charge. Once you're done with the palace, you can send a spell trap from field to grave for Allure Dance to summon all of your Allure Queens back from the grave. Because we have a level 7 light Allure Queen and a level 3 dark, that easily makes a light dark Chaos Angel. We could also bring back 2 level 7s, which can make Kurzebs, the Jailed Glutton. Not a common card, but a rather good one. It gets big for each material, and you can eat any normal or quick play spell that is activated while it's on the field. This card becomes unaffected by that, and then on end phase you can set one of its materials. So, for example, if we activate Spellbook of Secrets, we can then eat it and then set it on end phase so we can use it again on our next turn. Or even better, if we use Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, we can set it and then it's live for the opponent's turn because it's a quick play spell. It's a very cool card that we make off of 2 Allure Queens at some point in that combo if we get there. Then the biggest engine in the deck is the Charmers, and that's kind of unfortunately by necessity. The Charmer engine has to be pretty big. But we've got 9 starters for it. We've got Blue Boy, we've got 3 Spellbooks of the Grand Circle, and 3 Spellbook of Secrets, which searches Spellbook of the Grand Circle, and Blue Boy can also search it. We don't want to use our normal summon on Blue Boy, but it's not a bad one because this is the most versatile engine in the deck. It's also the one with the most bricks with the Charmers themselves. We have 4 in their Heart Garnets, depending on the situation, and then we've got the Familiar Possessed, which are also Heart Garnets, depending on the situation. So that kind of sucks, but thankfully Spellbook of the Grand Circle lets you put 2 cards from hand back. So if you open one of the Familiar Possessed, you can just put it back with the Spellbook. If you open one of these guys, you can discard it, then add it back with the Spellbook. Like, it does sometimes suck ass, but it's not the worst situation to be in, specifically just because you get to put cards back in your deck off of this engine. So we've got 9 starters for the engine, and what it does is it gets you primarily to Familiar Possessed Lina and Familiar Possessed Dark. These guys are really, really good, but you have to summon them by their own method to gain their effects. So Lina and Dark have to be summoned with their associated Charmer, so Dark the Dark Charmer and Lina the Light Charmer, and another monster that shares its type. So for Dark, you have to have Dark on field and a Dark monster. For Lina, you have to have Lina on field and a Light monster. But then you can special this from deck as kind of a contact fusion sort of summoning condition. It's like really unique. But you can just summon this from deck as an inherent, and when summoned this way, Lina lets you add a spellcaster with 1500 defense from deck to hand. That can be a lot of things. That can be Zorua. That can be, I think that was it for the Magistus engine. But that can be Sylvie, who is in a pinch a good normal summon. That can be the Chaos Allure Queen, which gets you the whole Allure Queen package. It's a really good effect. And then Dark's is even better, arguably, because his allows you to search any level 3 or 4 light spellcaster. Again, that can be Spenta, that can be Riliona, that can be the Sylvie, that can be Rushia, that can be any of the Allure Queens, that can be any of the Fairy Tales. Just so much ability to search out of this package. It's crazy. And we have Awakening of the Possessed, which might look kind of funky, but it's easily searchable when we go through the Charmers of the Grand Circle line, which is part of that primary combo. You'll see that in the combo area. But this makes all of our stuff giant. It gives it 300 attack for each attribute you control, and in Genesys that matters a lot more than in Advanced. Our stuff gets big. It can get up to like 3,000-4,000 attack for 5 monsters on the board, and that's just lethal to anybody. And is a nice bonus. If you summon an 1850 attack spellcaster, you get to draw a card. We just do that passively. We'll do it on our turn. We'll do it on the opponent's turn. Just like a lot of free card draw, good generation, things like that. and you just have to deal with playing the Charmers to get there. Then we've got a relatively small Magistus package. This is the one I'm the least sold about, but I think it's pretty good. The idea here is that any of these pieces are searchable through various methods from the previous 3 engines. So you can like search Spenta off of the Risiella, then pitch Spenta to search either one of these guys if we need a normal summon, or the Crowley to summon out to do a free fusion summon. And then we're playing 3 Verimagics and the 1 Jenny because this acts as extension in hand. It just like lets you turn on the Magistus engine if an opponent activates a card or effect while this is in hand. It's weird, but it normally lets you summon out the Riliona, who can search as another Verimagic because it is each effect once per turn. So then you can use the first effect to dump Jenny. Jenny banishes one of the Vers from grave to summon out Zorua, and then you've got a bunch of bodies ready to go there. So it's a pretty solid package. It's relatively small. We don't mind normal summoning Riliona or sometimes the Zorua. It's worse in Genesys because we don't have the links, so we can't add Artemis, so Zorua is not actually a 1-card starter here. We have to have something else going already to use his effect, but I think it's still worth including. And they can bridge into at least the fairy tales. That's kind of why they're here in the first place. They make a monster negate to protect us. They can make a Mechaba. They bridge into the fairy tales. It's a pretty good engine, even if it's not the best one in the deck. Then we've got the fairy tales themselves, who have their own weird game plan going on, and they don't bridge into other stuff, but they're a reliable normal summon in a relatively small package. It only costs 10 cards, and since we're playing a 60-card pile deck, that's not that much, and we don't hate seeing any of the pieces like we do with Charmers, so I think it's a pretty good engine, even if it doesn't go crazy like the rest of them. Oh, and then speaking of Charmers, we also got Spiritual Art Familiars and Possessed Destiny in Blazing Dominion. These are Charmer support. They're fine depending on your build, but it's 3 more, 2 to 3. You don't have to play each arena, but it is a monster negate. But it's 2 to 3 more bricks that kind of doesn't do a whole ton for the deck, so I don't think we need to be playing them in this particular build, but be aware that these are good cards that you should consider when you are playing the Charmer package. And that's about it. It's going to be impossible for me to explain how all of these lines work because they are branching and crazy, so we're going to go do some longer combo explanations than normal. Alright, so Omega unfortunately will not let me use technically unreleased cards in the Genesys queue for whatever reason. It used to let me do it, so we can't actually show you any games this week with this deck. But that means that you get a special treat instead, where we're going to do extra long combo tutorials where I walk you through it because the deck is so complicated and the combos are so complicated as is. I figure they could use some extra love. So this one is just going to be Spellbook Magician of Prophecy and any single card to put back in the deck. So we're going to activate Prophecy. You can go straight into Spellbook of the Grand Circle if you're afraid of Droll, but I'm not, so I'm going to grab a Spellbook of Secrets just to thin the deck out a little bit to improve our draws later in the game. Then we can go Spellbook of the Grand Circle to add all 4 of our Charmers, and then we can put back 2 cards. That's going to be whatever random brick you had, and 1 of the level 5 Charmers. It doesn't matter which of the level 5s you put back, we just have to make sure we keep Dark and Lina here. Then we're going to go Spellbook of the Grand Circle to summon Charmers of the Grand Circle using specifically the 5 you kept and Lina. Do not use the Dark here. We summon out Charmers, and then Charmers can add a Possessed spell trap, so we're going to grab Awakening of the Possessed, and then special summon 1 spellcaster from the grave. That's going to be Lina the Light Charmer. Then we can activate Awakening of the Possessed and contact fuse our Lina plus our Charmers, who is Light, into Familiar Possessed Lina out of the deck, which triggers the Awakening for a mandatory card draw, and the Familiar Possessed will search. This is our first decision point in the deck. or in this combo specifically. Now, we've already used our normal, otherwise we could go like Zoro as a pretty fine get here, but even better is almost always going to be Chaos Allure Queen. We get our random draw, it's just a spellbook Magician of Prophecy, blue boy, just so we don't mess with the combo at all. Then Chaos Allure Queen can pitch the Dark that we kept to summon herself out, and then we can use her second effect to equip the Dark, which allows us to summon the level 3 Allure Queen from deck. Note, it's really, really neat that Chaos Allure Queen takes the name of whatever card she equips to herself, which means we now have Dark the Dark Charmer on field, so we can contact fuse into Familiar Possessed Dark using the 2 Allure Queen / Darks. Then the Familiar Possessed is going to trigger to add any level 3 or level 4 light spellcaster, which, again, second decision point, we've got a whole bunch of them. Unfortunately, though, we can't normal summon again, so like Luna's not a great pick here. We could go Match Girl, but there's a little bit better way to get access to that. We can't do Sylvie or Riliona because we don't have our normal. So instead we're just going to grab the Spenta here. Then we can overlay our 2 4s that are already on field and already spellcasters into Fairy Tail Wiccat, and then use her effect to detach 2 to send specifically Match Girl and the Tales of the Fairy Tales. Then we can summon out the Match Girl because we still have an 1850 attack spellcaster on board and use her effect to go get the field spell Fairy Tale Ball. We can activate that to then add a Luna to hand. And right here is where I'm just going to take a quick pit stop, pitch the Spenta, add Crowley, Crowley Poplars out, and then does a fusion summon. And hey look, we have an extra deck monster type on field, which means we can use him plus the Wiccat to make Zoroa, which is a monster negate to insulate the rest of our turn. Obviously we are well past the point of like Droll and Nibiru, but maybe they weren't expecting us to have an out to Nibiru. Or, like, if you didn't use your normal summon up to this point, then even if they nib you here because they have to, otherwise you have the Zoroa online, then great, like you still have your normal summon, you can summon the Luna or anything better you happen to have, so it's fine, it's fine. Then we're going to go Zoroa to equip specifically either the Spenta or Crowley so that you can send it for his effect. It doesn't really matter which, we'll go Crowley here. Then we can still summon out, or not summon out, but equip the Tales of the Fairy Tales to our Match Girl that's still on the field, which allows us to normal summon the Luna, and then Luna effect to add another copy of Luna. Then we can fuse for the Tales of the Fairy Tales using we go into Weaver here, and we're going to use the blue boy that we had left on our field. This is just like a place that you can use it so we don't actually have to worry about it. And we can use the Luna on field or the Luna in hand. We're not going to have another way to normal summon out the one in hand, so it's just kind of like follow up if you want to keep it. The Luna on field is pretty good just because it is a bounce technically at some point. So I'm going to use the one in hand. We'll make the Weaver of Fairy Tales, and then we can use Weaver of Fairy Tales effect to special summon out Sleeper, who is a spell trap negate, but at like a really steep cost, so we don't want to use it unless they're trying to evenly us, or like otherwise we exactly have to use it to survive. But the only thing left in grave is Spenta, which technically we could equip something to the Zoroa, and then we could contact Fuse for Chirozzo with the 2 guys in the back row. We don't really need to do that, we'll keep it as follow-up. And we just end with this giant board that's pretty good. It's a monster negate off of Fairy Tale Ball, Weaver of Fairy Tales is another monster negate, the Zoroa is a monster negate plus a destruction of a card on field when you do that. The Luna can bounce something. Did I mention Sleeper? Sleeper's a spell trap negate. And then we can summon back the Wiccat by sending off one of our light fairy tales, just like which protects the other light fairy tales that we still have on board. And we remember we drew a card, so we're only down 1 card off of this. We should still have 4 in hand. So, you know, it's pretty solid. Makes a giant board. Everyone is really, really big thanks to Awakening of the Possessed, which is cool. And we've got follow-up. Cool? Cool. Alright, and then we'll do one more big, long mainline combo. This is going to be the Allure Queen stuff, because you probably don't know how it works. This takes either Allure Dance or Palace. Dance is better, but you can make it work even without it. And then you need to have any 2 random cards in hand to discard for this one. So you can always just do it. It doesn't matter what you're discarding. So Dance can add Allure Palace if you didn't already open it, and then we can activate the Allure Palace and use its effect to ditch any card in hand to go get the Chaos Allure Queen to hand. Do not special summon as part of this deck. Then Allure Palace can ditch another random card in hand to go get Allure Queen level 7 here specifically. I'm trying to remember if it matters at this point. I don't think so. But we can go Allure Queen Chaos, pitch whichever one we grab to summon out the Chaos Allure Queen, to equip the one that we discarded to herself, which allows us to summon out 3. Again, because yeah, I guess 3's the call here. And then the Chaos Allure Queen can flip out, because we have Allure Palace on board, into any of these guys. And it's a special summon. This doesn't add to hand, which is really, really neat. So we could go Rilliona, go through some Magistus stuff. Don't summon Blue Boy. He is normal summon only, so that doesn't matter here. But the best summon is almost always going to be Astalar of the White Forest. Then we can go Astalar, send off the Allure Palace because it's done its job to summon out Sylvie of the White Forest, and we can use her effect to add. You could go Tails to get access to a little bit more extension, but I like to get Sinful Spoils of the White Forest here, because we are going to go into some of the Fairy Tail stuff, and this lets you fusion summon into the other Fairy Tail fusion on the opponent's turn, which can be an Omni-Negate. So we're going to grab that. And then we can go into the Risiella Sinister Soul of the White Forest, who can pitch the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest that we just searched to go search any of our light spellcasters or anything from the White Forest engine. We have not normal summoned here, so we still have access to a normal summon. So we could just go Fairy Tail Luna, we could grab the Spoon, I forget which one I intended to do. Let's go we'll go Spenta here. This sounds fun. Then we can trigger the Astalar because we sent a thing to graveyard, and then Sinful Spoil of the White Forest will set itself. And then one neat thing here, we'll get into it when we get there. So we can pitch the Spenta to add Rilliona, and that just puts Spenta in the graveyard, which gives us something to summon back off of the Zorowo when we get there. We normal summon Rilliona, and then use her effect to add Verimagic Lacrima of Light. Then we can use Lacrima of Light to bin, well, anything in the deck just about. There's like 1 or 2 traps for the White Forest stuff that we can't bin, but basically this is this foolish as anything in the deck. And while there are some cool options, there's like Match Girl, but we don't have the stat line to actually summon her back. We could, if we had like a couple of Charmers stuck in hand, we could use Spellbook and fuse with them. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do here. But probably generically the best option has been the Jenny, because then Jenny can copy the Verimagic's effect to special summon from deck. We can special summon out Zorua here, and our board is looking a little bit full, but that's okay, we'll make it work. So then here we're going to want to clear up some space. There's a lot of stuff we can do, but really importantly, we're just going to go into Diabell with our 6 and our Astalar. That's going to allow us to add a thing back. We can get back the Allure Palace here, which is going to let us send it for the Allure Dance to summon back exactly one of our Allure Queens, exactly the Chaos Allure Queen. So one of the weird things with Dance is it forces you to summon as many as possible, and we don't want to summon out the level 7 here just because we don't have a convincing way to use the body. So while we only have 1 space on field, we're going to use this effect so that we can only summon out 1 and we don't clog up our board even more. So we'll activate the Palace, use Dance, send off the Palace. Thankfully you can activate Palace multiple times a turn to summon out specifically Chaos Allure Queen, and then we can go Chaos Allure Queen plus the level 3 that's just been chilling on our board to make a Light Dark Chaos Angel. We don't have to banish anything, no reason to do that. And then we can go Zorua to equip to himself. What do I do here? Oh yeah, it's the Iwas. This is the main reason the Iwas is in here, but you can fusion summon into it technically in certain situations, but for the most part it's just because you don't want to equip either of the other 2. You want to keep those in extra deck. And then Zorua can special summon from the grave. Interestingly enough, you can add Sylvie, but it doesn't really matter here because whatever we get, we're just gonna either contact, fuse, or overlay. So here we will get started on the fairy tale train by overlaying our Spenta and our Riliona. Then we can use her effect to detach both to bin, Fairy Tale Match Girl, and the Tales of the Fairy Tales again. So that gets us access to that engine. And then we just kind of have this Zorua chillin'. There's a couple things you could do with it. I'm just going to turn it into a Chirozzo. Like, we've got the Iwas already. We can turn it into Chirozzo. It's pretty chill. And then we can go Match Girl effect to summon out because we still have Wickhat on field, and then use her effect. To add a Fairy Tale card, we're going to add the ball, and then we can activate the ball, who can go get us a Fairy Tale monster. We can get a Luna here. We can't really do Luna just because we don't really have the space. We're kind of just accruing follow-up and customizing our disruptions at this point. And you can see that we make a lot of follow-up in this deck. So Tails we can activate to equip to the Wickhat, and then we can fuse with the Tails the into, I mean, you could make Zorua on this board, which is kind of interesting, but I'm just going to make Weaver of Fairy Tales using, what sounds fun? I guess we'll do Wickhat and the Luna in hand. And then you can't actually summon off of him. I guess the better call was to use the Match Girl on board instead of the Luna in hand and then keep her for follow-up, because then you can summon out your Spell Trap Negate. But this is the end of the combo anyway, so just imagine I did that and didn't screw it up in the 11th hour. So we've got the Spell Trap Negate, we've got Luna in hand for follow-up, our Synchros are unaffected, nothing is destructible in battle, we've got Diabell in case they clear some of our stuff, we can negate an attack and gain Giant. We've got 2 monster negates. We can fusion into Teller of Fairy Tales on the opponent's turn, which unfortunately, because we don't have Super Poly, we can't use the opponent's monster for it, which means we can't get the board destruction on summon. But we still get an Omni negate out of the deal. So lots of follow-up, like a bunch of disruption, Chaos Angel, Diabell, all this good stuff. It's a pretty good deck, and it doesn't take that much to go, and there's lots of extension. Cool, cool. And we're back with just some quick closing thoughts on this first incarnation of Spellslop. So, Spellslop is kind of a thing that's been doable a little bit since we got Spenta, and it looks a lot like this, but this is a deck that's going to get infinitely better, and I mentioned it in yesterday's video, so if you watched both, first, thank you, but also I'm sorry for being a broken record. But as soon as we get, what is it, the Regulus stuff, this deck gets much, much better, just because I don't think it actually improves as much as the Magistus Fairy Tale build does, but it still gives us a bunch more special summon starters, and then the Vare Maid of Endymion is almost always the best search off of Riziella in basically any deck forever. Just because she can search you up the Vare Magic pitch Jenny, summon out one of these guys. So just having access to Vare Maid of Endymion is so important for this style of deck. And then we don't mind these guys either because they're just extenders and special summon starters and all that good stuff. So yeah, no, it's this build, I think, as funny as it is to say, considering yesterday's was technically a meta deck, I think this one's better for now just because you have so much extension available to you, and a lot of our inherent limitations, like having to play 4 of the Charmers and them all being Garnets, are fixed to some extent because we get to discard a whole bunch of stuff. We can send things off Droplet, we can discard for the other Palace, we can fuse with like a Charmer in hand, we can fuse off for Tales of the Fairy Tales as part of Fairy Tales combo, which then puts it in the graveyard, which then turns on Spellbook of the Grand Circle. Like, it's... The problem with this deck is that while I do think it's actually pretty good, it's not like tier 1 or anything, but it's pretty good, it's so freaking complicated. You have to spend time with this deck to actually understand it, and I have messed with various builds of Spellslop, and I'm still not great with some of the lines just because they are so branching. But I think that's cool. I like a deck that requires skill, like a deck that encourages pet decking and like actually spending time with it and learning and optimizing and things like that. And this is definitely one of those decks. But anyways, that's going to do it for this week, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.